Great. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion on the VCs are watching investing in the creator economy. We were backstage and Miten was saying the VCs are always watching. And very interesting to host two of my most favorite investors, Dave from Lightspeed and Miten, who's one of the most prominent angels in the ecosystem. Thank you so much, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Totally. I'll start with a quick introduction for both, and then we'll jump into the topic at hand. Uh, with Dave, I think from being an MBA at Harvard to being a partner at Lightspeed, being both an operator as well as a venture capitalist for the last few years, I think decades now, they've seen everything in entrepreneurship. He and his team at Lightspeed have been engaged with numerous startups revolutioning the creator economy, leveraging digital trends, and have a strong thesis around the creator space. They've invested in us, NAS Academy, Pocket FM, Front Row, and I think continue to build even stronger conviction as the space scales up. And with Mithane's a key leader at Cred today and has a long history of being associated with the content space, especially with MX Player, as well as being the chief strategy officer at Times Internet. Passionate engineer with experience across product. He's one person who understands content businesses deeply, given having seen the scale firsthand as an operator. Thank you so much, guys, for being here with us. It's a pleasure hosting you all. you know we'll quickly start, Dave, with you, right? I think last 2 years have been very interesting for this creator economy as a key keyword that has started scaling. Initially started off as Twitter, over time just moved to becoming a key investment thesis for some of the key funds all across. What's Lightspeed's way of having seen and exploring this space been?
Thanks, Anirudh. Pleasure to be here. Lightspeed's way of thinking about this is that we see content across having an impact across so many of our companies, and then creators get involved in those companies in different ways. So I'll just give you a few segments where we see content playing a great role. There's obviously consumer services of various kinds where content plays a central role. We've got in our portfolio Cameo out in the US, where of course creators and influencers are creating content for pay, pay per use almost. We've got companies like Guruji, which is an astrology service for India, where you can think of astrologers as content creators in a certain way, and they're creating content. We've got Byju's, which is not a creator-led sort of service in a sense, but there's tons of content, of course, at the core of that. So lots of these consumer services where content is core. We've got user-generated content also in a bunch of companies out there, and we all know the companies out there in India, in the US, everywhere. Tons of that happening. And then the only other place I wanted to point out is a segment of B2B software for creators or services for creators. You mentioned NAS Academy, which is educating influencers and creators to create content and businesses essentially for themselves. We've got companies like Teachment in India, where you can think of teachers as creators of a certain kind. We've got commerce companies also out there where content is central to the experience. So there's different business models at work here, and tons of innovation happening. I think the only thing I take out of this is that it's becoming very verticalized. So creators come in different shapes and sizes in terms of types of content they create and audiences they appeal to. And so a lot of the platforms out there are becoming verticalized and specialized to serve these different types of creators and the businesses they're creating.
Awesome. And Miten, for you, how has that been, having seen all of this at operator scale at very large, corporates like Times?
No, I think what's changed fundamentally, if you were to look at the stuff, let's say 2 years ago to now, is how much more direct agency creators have themselves, as opposed to, initially they had to rely on agents in the middle who would represent them on the IP, on the monetization, on the copyrights, things like that. And there used to be a lot of these structures that were put in place, and there were rules of the road. You couldn't change them and things like that. And so fundamentally, what's happened is that all of these tools have sort of cut out the middleman. Now the creator directly has a relationship with their audience, and obviously there are platforms who have their rules now, but it's become a lot more scalable for creators to actually have a longer lasting relationship with their audience as opposed to the things before. And so a lot of this, of course, is different from a modality perspective. So if you're a blogger, you can do Substack, which is very different as opposed to relying on traditionally like a newspaper or a publication of sorts, and you can become a like, for example, Stratechery is a great example, right? Ben Thompson is as probably as large as many media companies when it comes to subscription revenues himself. Similarly, you've got people on the podcasting side of the world. You've got people on the on the video side of the world, short video, long video, and I think so. So I think fundamentally what's changed is the business relationship and the construct of how these things were scaling before, and what the rules of the road was. So that's one big shift. I think the other big shift, especially for creators in India, is also that because of this sort of um, liquidity, they now also reach global audiences. My friends in the other parts of the world are consuming content from these Indian creators just as much as the local community. So the internet, in that sense, has really broadened the market of for creators from an audience perspective. I mean, comedians are being called for shows overseas when they became sort of experts and popular in things in India. So it's a very exciting time. I'd say there's a lot of churn in the traditional ways of doing things, and I think we're sort of very early in the cycle of a lot of this playing out, whether that is ownership, distribution, monetization, cash flow management. There's a lot of things that are going to fundamentally change. It's very exciting.
Maybe one thing I'll add to that, Miten, is that when we think about India as an investment destination, we see an India advantage in place. India has been actually a center for content creation for decades. It's not even sort of a last 5 years type of thing. I think you're right. It's become now more direct connect between between creators and consumers, perhaps. But whether it's animation, a lot of the animation
Yeah.
in the world is produced in India.
Yeah.
Movies
Prime
of various
focus.
kinds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so many other areas. Just the content is coming from India. Now we're just sort of surfacing it. The way I think about it, another way of slicing of sort of looking at this is that India is a very entrepreneurial economy to begin with. 60 million small businesses, and we've seen them around every corner. Your kirana stores and your small factories and so on. But actually, equally, there's actually a digital entrepreneurial economy out there. Tutors, musicians, comedians, you mentioned, people selling things based on what they say about it. So content-based commerce, video commerce, all of this has been happening. And now it's sort of being organized in a way and expanded.
No, totally. And, very curious to understand. And because these are category creating businesses, right? They've primarily never existed before, or probably never been organized before, right? So, for a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are attending probably this session or will look at it, right? How do investors look at, very emerging spaces like this where there's not been any clear precedent of a winner before? So how do you go about making those bets? Like, what's the framework around investments here?
Let me take that first, and Dave's probably got a
Yeah.
more advanced view, but I'll take a more angel investor view, right? Anirudh, I actually think that there are very few pure play new categories. Okay, maybe NFTs and the way things are happening around those might be a new thing, but again, there also it might just be collecting art, right?
Yeah.
We don't know yet. But so I think that if you go back at least the last 50 years, and maybe earlier is you might leave it, but if you go back the last 50 years, I think the formats of media, forms of media, the modalities of media have not changed, right? It's either video, it's audio, it's text, and then these are the kind of things that you consume, and maybe there's animated worlds and stuff like that. What's changed is the platforms on which you consume them, right? So video was first consumed in linear television, then it became sort of on-demand television, and now it's become smartphones, small screens, right? So it's ultimately still video content, and there's the fundamental sort of that doesn't change. The platform of consumption sharing, same for audio, same for text. So from that perspective, when I look at things, I don't look for an absolutely new category, because those are very, very rare. What I think about is this new form factor, or is this new format going to be a more convenient method, or a more personalized method, or a more scalable method to consume that, as opposed to the previous world, right? And that's really the key shift that I would look for. And I the things that get me very excited are possibilities for greater selection, right? So suddenly, let's take an example of Pocket FM, right? Pocket FM is bringing on online audio content from authors who've written stories, in various different languages, which are very popular in the sort of the depth of India, the rural parts of India, all over the place. And these stories are now getting discovered, right? And so selection is expanding massively. Similarly, as a result of selection expanding massively, consumers are able to discover new things, right? And that again will add more of a layer of both engagement and monetization, things like that. So for me, that's what gets me excited around, from a B2C perspective. And then from a B2B perspective, is this fundamentally just a new way to monetize, right? So when I was on the board of OML for a few years, one of the things we used to think a lot about is that, when you build a creator, right? When you invest in a creator as an artist management platform, you think about various different ways in which you can monetize that talent, right? So literally, talent is a resource, as an asset, and then you think about different ways. So for example, you take a comedian, you think about live shows, you think about online shows, you think about sponsorships and brands, and product placement, things like that. And so it was, as I said before, it was like the job of a manager of sorts. Now that's changing, right? Now it's become more of, are these things going to get unbundled and be done differently, more independently, in a more scalable, or lesser, by the way, and lesser commission as well, right? When there's a gatekeeper, the chances that the end creator keeps bulk of the revenue sort of reduces. So to me, those are the two broad um, fundamental things that I look for, in new things.
Very interesting. Dev?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in a sense selection of has expanded, but I think selection of business models has also expanded. I think if you're a creator out there today, you know, yes, you have a lot more outlets out there. You can engage with your audience over Twitch, you can go over YouTube, you can go over Instagram, and sort of in India, you can go over ShareChat, and you can go over so many other products out there, right? Globally, you can go with TikTok, so many things, right? And in some sense, it's too many platforms out there. And just to build on I'll come to the business models in a second. The sort of issues that creators have when trying to build businesses, one is sort of just being recognized and getting access to an audience. Hundreds of millions of people being online doesn't mean they'll come and watch you or consume your content. It's sort of almost a perfect marketplace out there. There's millions of creators. All of us are creators just by posting stuff on social platforms, and then there's more professional creators who are doing this for a living, and it's not easy to stand out either. So there's a whole class of tools that are coming up that are enabling creators to capture the audience that they have on all these large audience platforms out there, and then service them in different ways, whether it's through private content, private events, merchandising. NFTs is now sort of something people are experimenting with for that class of businesses. Commerce, of course, and so on. So there's that whole class of products out there. We see a ton of companies entering that space, platforms to enable creators, and it's very quickly leading to these platforms going to specialize, back to my comment on verticalization in a sense. So that's one. The second class of companies we see is consumer facing companies. And again, that's verticalizing in different ways and different formats. Everybody's got their special sort of wedge in the market. Twitch has a certain type of content, of course, and so on. But in India, Pocket FM has a certain sort of place in the market with audio content, and ShareChat has a certain thing, Snap and Facebook and Insta, and all of these guys have special sort of wedges in the market. The interesting new area coming up, not new, but an area that's getting even hotter, is commerce, video commerce. And I think that's going to be interesting because commerce has to date been, relegated to the top 100 million, 150 million people in India, and getting it out there, not just in India, but lots of other countries, to sort of the mass market. I think content is the conduit to do that. And content enabled commerce services, video commerce, I mentioned before, is another example. So there's all these areas. And then the final one, it's not a direct connect between creators and consumers, but a lot more creators coming into the market with lots of new creation tools. That's also happening. So tons of content being produced. All the education technology companies in India are producing content, long form video content on Amazon and MX and all these other players out there is coming. It's just an explosion out there. So tons of different companies in the market. It's almost too many. And as an investor, I look at all these companies, and you really have to sort through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies. It's a good thing to have. I mean, compared to 5 years ago, there was almost nothing happening, and it's just exploded.
Awesome. No, I think, as I say, I think if content's X today, in the next 10 years, it's going to be 100X. So I think it's literally sitting at the tip of the inflection point here. Awesome. So and this very interesting question I is thinking a lot about that. Do you see the possibility of creators becoming, say, unicorn businesses by themselves, as we are seeing these individuals move to brands of their own with strong community commerce being driven? Do you see that as a possibility, that you'll be funding just creators and probably not, large scale businesses?
Anirudh, the question is, what if you ask me? We've already had a multi-decathon in this category, right? Byju's, the quintessential, he's a rock star, superstar teacher. That's how it started, and then the company around it that got formed is what does many different things. But I think the question is, it's going to come down to, in my view, how each of these people's business model evolves. It's tough to sort of say in what shape or form one of these things would look like. But to me, Byju's is a great example of effectively a unicorn star teacher and star creator, effectively getting out there and doing something. And actually, it's funny, in 2012 I written a blog post that teachers would be celebrities in the future, and to a large extent you're seeing this play out in many platforms. Whether there will be a single entity becoming a unicorn, it's also, what is a question of a unicorn, right? I mean, like, the Beeple sale of everyday NFT for $69 million. I mean, if something does $60 million in revenue once a year, I mean, that's not bad. I mean, that's a unicorn, right? If you were to underwrite that cash flow in a sense, will that happen every year? God knows. But I think you just have to put a very different lens to that question, and it may not surface itself from a traditional structure of what a company looks like, right? the here the cash flows, here the IP creation might be quite different. I mean, even Michael Jackson, for example, his estate still earns lots of revenue, from licensing and stuff over time. So this world is not a software world; it's a content world, it's a copyright world, it's an IP world, which is quite different.
I think I think it's a very good terminology that the world is probably not software but a content world, and I think all of us are just too immersed into it. Awesome, Miten. I think great analogy.
Just to add to that, I think you know we've had over the last 10 years in the startup world lots of celebrities come in and start businesses of different kinds, and leverage the brand that they built up. Obviously, the canonical example is the Kardashians. Several of them coming online and creating large sort of beauty businesses, and in a sense, our beauty business. In our portfolio in the US, we've got Lady Gaga with House, we've got Gwyneth Paltrow with Goop, we've got Jessica Alba with Honest Company, and many other such sort of celebrities who come in on and leverage their brand value and reach and audience to build businesses. I think the difference now is we're seeing creators being or celebrities being created from being nothing. Like they just came onto Insta and they've become celebrities, and now they have such a huge audience that they can launch businesses behind that. There was this story a couple of days ago in China, with their big sale event. I forget what it's called, annual sale event,
Yeah.
where an individual did like a billion or like 3 billion in commerce
Yeah.
sales, like
Yeah.
within 12 hours. Like that's the power of
Crazy.
this economy where you're unleashing individuals and you're creating celebrities in a sense, versus celebrities coming in and cashing in on their existing fame from some other sort of domain of life, which has been happening for a long time. That's the change. And
Makes
people is an
sense.
example of that, right? In my opinion, I mean, created by this new world and now cashing in on that in a sense.
Well, that's very interesting. In fact, yeah, it was just amazing to see the depth of that economy is just not so visible yet. Imagine something like that happening in India, right? And India moving to pure like that, the true power of content-led commerce. I think it's be extremely crazy. And very interestingly, now that this creator-led economy is just scaled up very heavily, and it's shown us trends that we probably never thought would come in the form they've already come. Do you see certain blank spaces where you think that this is something you thought could be very massive, but you've not seen played out, or you see something which is already in motion and you're very bullish on in the creator economy trend?
I can start with a few areas that we are exploring. One is video commerce, and enabling that in different ways. I think in countries like India, it hasn't arrived yet, but we're starting to see the beginnings of it. So platforms for that, creators who leverage that and become celebrities, and who can sell not only their own merchandise but third-party merchandise. I think that's an area that's very interesting. Education is an area. EdTech, the intersection of EdTech and creator economy is also very interesting. Financing, Miten, you mentioned cash flows earlier, cash flow management, financing. There's actually, in this world of content, copyright and licensing, and this, it's complex
Yep.
as the base case. Who different, where all the revenue flows, and who participates in it has to be managed, and so tooling for that is an area. And then all these consumer services that are content based. There's a ton that's coming in countries like India, continents like Africa, South America. There's lots of different languages. It all requires different sorts of tooling out there. So that's another thing that we're seeing out there. And then, and like I said before, it's not hard to break through. It is hard to break through to large audiences. So actually, aggregation businesses continue to make sense. It's not as if, I don't think Substack is necessarily going to win the world on written content. there's lots of there's a Wattpad out there that's going to make sense to exist. There's a Medium that makes sense to exist. All of these will continue to remain. So aggregation, I think, continues to make sense, and we continue to see new companies there. There's a company out of India called Turnip that's enabling creators for in the gaming on the gaming side. That's very interesting as a company. So yeah, tons going on.
Awesome. And very interestingly, we're at this inflection point in history when professionalized creators are becoming one of the most desired jobs. Creators become creators because they love to create, and as they grow their audience, expand revenue channels, this burden of managing their day to day of their own businesses grows heavier. And very interesting to think about a stage where do we see creators becoming like the next SMBs of themselves, and this entire play of fintech tools, platformization. What are your thoughts on the creator layer emerging as the new SMB layer of sorts?
It's already happened to some extent. I mean, if you know, creators, if anything, are very digitally savvy. They're almost early adopters of a lot of tooling out there. Creators have been using WhatsApp for the longest time to reach out to audiences. I've heard of a ton of companies, not companies, but individuals who have subscription services on WhatsApp. They'll send out content to a group. They'll only let certain people in the group who are paying, and they'll use it. Now, WhatsApp is not meant to be a creator economy tool necessarily. That wasn't the vision as far as I know when they started out, but it's become that. So people are using these tools that were not meant for, and they're early adopters, these creators. So it's already happening out there. I think now specialized tooling is coming up for them. A Shopify for teachers, a Shopify for, you know, uh, I don't know, for
Independent financial
astrologers.
advisors. It's lots of stuff.
Yeah,
Like just literally, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I
I mean,
think so.
what is the creator economy? Again, that's also a very, I mean, an individual sort of, I mean, AngelList is a, creator tool for, syndicate creation for angel investor who wants to go out and like, bring a crowd of people to come invest with them, right? So it's a pretty broad lens.
No, I think you're very right. In fact, we at Pepper also, given the scale of freelancers that are coming in, I think even creator education for that matter, right? That how do you spawn a new generation of creators at scale, given the ecosystem that's shaping up, actually asking us to even think about these questions. So yeah, I think very right. And I think eventually connecting all of this, one thing I love about this space is how it's almost reinventing every 3 to 4 months, is asking all of us to just adapt with the trends. So this entire bridge of connecting the creator economy with Web3, which is NFTs, crypto, social tokens. How are you seeing this play out? We're seeing a lot of funds, angels, upskill over this segment a lot and obsess over this a lot.
Then you want to take that, or?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll take it first. I have a very limited view on it actually. I think there's just a lot of um, things sort of that appear as spaghetti being thrown up on a wall, to try and see if something sticks. There's a lot of that right now. So I think there are very few breakout ideas or even seeming to be breakout ideas around this that I've come across. Obviously, I've not been as active as an investor as probably Dave and his team have been, but I feel like there is I think the as an investor now I don't think about this Web3 world as a India first world. I think the whole platform is so new that if you want to publish NFTs, um, you're not necessarily going to do it because somebody is an Indian platform. You'll probably go to a global platform, right? And so again, I think the nuances of the brand new world may well be written by global platforms as opposed to potentially India first ones. I think what I'm very excited about is you know micro content and micro monetization around these things, which is where I feel a lot of exciting bite-sized consumable stuff might emerge. But other than that, I think it's still hard. It's still so early, to be honest, to be able to pick out anything meaningful or massively like clear what the future is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a noisy environment for sure. I mean, if you're the way we think about it is that, there have been new consumer platforms that come along every so often, typically every decade or so, and then a whole new wave of innovation is spurred on top of that. You think about the internet, quote unquote, in the mid 90s, that became more consumer friendly through browsers, and that spurred a whole set of companies. You look at social as a platform, that spurred a whole new set of companies. You look at mobile smartphones as a platform, Web 2 as a platform, and then now actually we see Web 3 as a platform that is going to spur a whole new set of innovation, not just in the niche area of crypto, but in all sorts of other sectors, Web 3 plus gaming, Web 3 plus commerce, Web 3 plus, you name your consumer space out there. And so, as a creator, we just think it's going to be a massive impact. As Lightspeed, we funded about 20 crypto slash blockchain slash Web3 businesses in the last 3 years. We just announced something in FTX yesterday. We did a crypto exchange in Indonesia recently, and so on. We see regional actually products being quite interesting. We think primarily because there's a lot of regulatory sort of barriers that need to be overcome, and then we see global exchanges being out there as well and global products. I think from a creator perspective, I think it's absolutely imperative to sort of come up the curve on NFTs and all that. I do think there's a massive bubble in NFTs, and it's going to burst at some point. It's just crazy at this point, but worth looking into and worth experimenting it with. Still early. Put something up on OpenSea or something and see what happens, but still early. Frankly, I don't understand it like fully, but worth experimenting in as a creator.
Awesome. No, great. I think we have a lot of founders on who are looking at this, right? To summarize this and I think close out the session. I think what are some key things or key thoughts you'd want to leave founders who are listening to this with about your view over the space, about just giving a direct message to founders out there.
I'll start. A few simple things. One is it takes time to build a great business. So don't be in a hurry. Be in a hurry, be impatient about those things. But at the same time, it's going to take many iterations. It's going to take a while. So, so keep at it as well is one, if you're really sort of excited about something. I think the second thing is that I think as Dave said before, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of chaos in this world. So I think having the ability to go deep and really figure out what the real differentiation for any of these, whether you're choosing a platform or a tool or what have you, I think it might become the difference between kind of making it or not making it. And the third thing is, I'll say, listen, talk to your peers, right? If you're in the creator economy, I think a lot of the learning will come from the network and the community around you, which is where the best kind of things will emerge. And if you're building a platform, think a lot more about what I was saying before, which is that it's not like you're reinventing, something fully. There are some lessons in history which you might find where you could sort of adapt from. So those are the thoughts I'd have. But very excited. If anyone's out there building something, you can email me miten.sampat@gmail.com. Love to chat.
Yeah, it's a broad question, Anirudh. So trying to figure out how to answer in a way that's something that's tangible for founders in the audience here. I think there's creators and then there's founders. So your question was about founders. So I'll focus on that. Some creators can become founders in a sense of technology businesses that scale. So that's the area that we specialize in a sense, tech businesses that scale. So I'll talk about that. I mean, it's all the same, general advice that applies. But when it comes to content-led technology businesses, I think really honing in on intellectual property and what is your moat there, is important, and understanding that. I think go out there and discover all the tools in the market. There's tons of vertically specific tools that are available, around the world, some on a global basis, some on a regional basis. There are tools out there that will bring demand to you. Obviously, Pepper is an example of that. But there are tools out there that will expose to different audiences. Turnip will expose to, or will let you deal in terms of gaming. Substack in terms of readers of various kinds around the world, specialized audiences who like specialized content. So discover your tooling, know that other platforms can bring you demand. You don't have to be out there selling necessarily, and let you market to those audiences. So just discover that technology. There's a ton going on, and it's not just all pure raw creative output that finds a few buyers out there. There's technology that can scale you, and get plugged into those technologies out there. Teachers, plug into Teachment, so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
I think
So
that's a it's a phenomenal point, which is it doesn't have to be a flash in the pan, one big event. You got to build this relationship with your audience and sustain it over time, and find those tools. Right? Really, it's a great point, Dave.
yeah,
Awesome. That's great to know. I think that's ton of learnings all jam packed in last 35 minutes. I think it's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks, Miten. I think it was a great conversation, and for all the founders out there, you can reach out to both Dave, Miten. I think we're just getting started, and I think creators are the new founders. There's this huge wave of entrepreneurship that's just going to hit India. I think creators are going to lead the charge. So very excited for that. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It was a wonderful session.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
thanks,
Bye.
Anirudh. Thanks, Miten. Bye.